These unforgettable blunders left the judges reeling, showcasing just how tough the MasterChef kitchen can be. The home cooks were tasked with creating a dish inspired by a special event, the State Fair. Sounds fun, right? But there was a twist.
Important to mention, this is not an excuse to just deep fry something and call it a day.
They had to cook something that truly embodied their home state's fair cuisine, something that screamed their state's identity. I mean, come on, the whole point of the State Fair is the deep fried food, right? But nope, the judges weren't letting them off easy. They were crystal clear about their expectations.
To cook an elevated version of classic State Fair food.
Just sticking to the basics wasn't gonna cut it. They needed to elevate the dish, make it worthy of a MasterChef kitchen. And just when you thought it couldn't get any tougher, Chef Ramsay dropped another bombshell.
You'll cook alongside everyone else from your home region.
Yeah, they were in for a tough one. The winner would get the power to save their entire region from elimination. On the flip side, the worst performer, they'd be packing their bags. This season wasn't playing around, every challenge could be your last. As soon as the challenge started, the home cooks rushed to the pantry to grab their ingredients.
Let's go, guys.
Yeah! Got a corn.
Parmesan.
Ooh, okay. Tomato.
Speaking of disasters, let's talk about Wayne from the Midwest for a second, and that's where Wayne made his first mistake. Wayne wanted to bring the flavors of the Circleville Pumpkin Festival, which has been around since 1903, into the MasterChef kitchen. It was the perfect idea for this challenge, but the way he decided to elevate it, that's where he went wrong.
I'm gonna top it with the butter poached lobster to elevate it.
The goal was to improve the dish, not overwhelm it and lose its originality, but Wayne was dead set on making his plan work.
Because I plan to win it for my team today.
When the judges checked in halfway through, Joe was already poking holes in Wayne's confidence, as he usually does.
Ever watched MasterChef before?
Maybe once or twice.
That should have been Wayne's cue to pivot, because if you've ever watched a second of Hell's Kitchen, you know how easily risotto can turn into a disaster.
Difficult dishes because it's so hard to make and we're very critical.
Calling the judges skeptical would be putting it mildly.
And I believe if you're gonna step into the box, you try to make hard contact.
But Wayne had already made his choice.
You're swinging for the fences.
Yo, I'm gonna win this challenge.
Where are you from?
Columbus, Ohio.
Then, as if things weren't bad enough, Wayne hit a snag towards the end of prep. Of course he did. And you didn't need to be a culinary genius to see where this was headed, straight to elimination. But Wayne, he was blissfully unaware.
I've always taken risks, and I thrive in high-pressure situations.
Yeah, we'll see about that. When it was time for the judges to taste his dish, reality hit hard.
Tastes right to you?
It could be better.
Joe never looks thrilled, but you could tell this dish really put him in a foul mood. And Aaron, let's just say his face said it all. Pure disgust. But somehow, it was Wayne's lucky day. Remember the whole best dish wins immunity for the whole team thing? Well, Kyla came through, carrying the Midwest on his back and dragging Wayne to safety at the last second.
On the Midwest are safe from elimination.
Awesome.
All of you, make your way up to the balcony with your tea.
Am I still salty about it? What gave you that idea? Anyway, the judges didn't let Wayne off the hook that easily.
That risotto was not on point tonight.
And if that wasn't embarrassing enough, Joe had a few more choice words.
Certainly would have been in the bottom. So you can thank your teammate Kyle for your spot on.
Talk about dodging a bullet. But the next contestant from the West, not as lucky as Wayne, let's talk about Amanda, who, in the same challenge that nearly got Wayne booted, decided to keep it simple.
I am making fish tacos.
You know, the idea of a taco could be something very simple, very straightforward.
Now, Amanda was all about that healthy lifestyle, and you could see it in her cooking. But since she had to stand out, she decided to take a little risk.
Do it two ways, kind of like my interpretation of that red and green sauce.
And just to make things harder on herself, she chose to make her own tortillas too.
Thing I've ever wanted, and I just got my apron. I do not want to give it back.
It was a big gamble, and Aaron saw it for what it was. One slip, and the whole dish could crash and burn. But if she nailed it, she'd be sitting pretty. Unlike Wayne, Amanda knew exactly what she was signing up for.
Wheelhouse a little bit, Amanda, with this?
Way out of my wheelhouse, way out.
She was going for a go big or go home moment, but sadly, we both know how this story ends. From the start, things didn't go as planned.
I'm not ready to go back and be a stay-at-home mom.
Amanda wasn't ready to throw in the towel, but the judges were thinking she should have switched gears a while ago. When Aaron asked if she was happy with her tacos, Amanda tried to put on a brave face, even though you could see the nerves creeping in.
The taco?
I do, and I'm happy with the tortillas.
Those very tacos landed her in the bottom 3.
Zone. I cooked something I've never cooked before.
Oh no, she's serving it.
When it came time for the tasting, Amanda's confidence took a hit, but she still tried to talk up her dish.
One is a very spicy red sauce. In California, you can't go to a fair without seeing tacos everywhere.
The judges, though, they weren't buying it. Nothing about the dish looked good. Chef Ramsay didn't hold back on his feedback.
300 meters down the road, I can buy one at $3. That will look better than that.
And he didn't stop there. He decided to give it to her straight, no sugarcoating. Amanda knew what was coming. She was on the brink of tears, but the judges had to break down every single part of that dish. And let me tell you, they couldn't find one good thing to say about it.
Very dry. It needs at least some color on there. It's just sort of floury and doughy. Knowing what you stood for,
I should have just done my...
I just quickly finished my sentence.
Even the fish? A total flop. Bland, no acid, no heat. Everything that could go wrong with those tacos went wrong. And Chef Ramsay didn't hold back. Amanda was so disappointed in herself that she interrupted Chef Ramsay mid-sentence. And you can imagine how that went over.
You stood for?
I should have just done my...
I just quickly finished my sentence, please.
Chef Ramsay was clearly trying to keep his cool. He didn't want to blow up on her because she looked like she might break down any second. Now, if anyone had a reason to be frustrated, it was Erin.
And there's just pico de gallo, which is very rudimentary. There's crema.
Meanwhile, Joe was in the middle of a politeness arc or something.
For the first time, I said they were good because I'm polite.
Joe being polite? Now, that's new. Here's hoping it sticks around. Totally not foreshadowing. Anyway, Amanda's fish tacos missed the mark in every way possible, and you can probably guess what happened next.
Say goodbye to your Regis teammates and drop your apron on your stove, please. Thank you, Amanda.
Yep, those tacos were her ticket out of the competition. But the next challenge, it ended up being a double whammy for 2 contestants. Yeah, I'm keeping the season 13 train going because episode 16 introduced contestants to a pretty complex challenge.
Not the wall, like, come on, anything but the wall.
Colby was dreading this challenge even before it kicked off.
This is a chaotic challenge.
If you're new to the show, let me introduce you to a challenge that strikes fear into even the bravest contestants. The wall. In this challenge, the contestants cook in pairs on opposite sides of a wall. Sounds easy, right? Wrong.
Create dishes that taste and look identical.
Communication is their only tool to create dishes that not only taste the same, but look identical too. Every tiny detail has to be spot on. But that's not all the judges threw at them.
Both cooks from the worst performing team will be going home.
Double elimination. Even if you have a great night in the kitchen, if your partner drops the ball, you're both out. So Colby and Brynn got paired up and decided to make this.
We're making a crispy skinned salmon with a parsnip puree, braised fennel, and a deep red wine, raspberry, and pear sauce.
Even with that wall towering over them, they went all in on a huge risk. Now, Chef Ramsay had never seen raspberry sauce paired with salmon, so he was definitely keeping an eye on them to see if they could pull it off. Colby and Brynn started off strong, but halfway through, communication issues started creeping in.
Oh, did you put it in already?
Yeah.
Oh, you didn't tell me. All right, give me a second.
And with communication as their lifeline, they were heading for disaster. The judges picked up on it immediately. But beyond the communication breakdown, Joe wasn't even sold on the concept of their dish.
Never even heard of it. Forget about duplicating it from 2 people who are not seeing each other make it.
Yeah, this wasn't looking good. The dish had to be both delicious and identical, and trying something brand new in this challenge, that was a risky move. But it was the communication issues that really did them in. When it came time to plate, Colby got real nervous.
Don't worry, mine looks like messy too. Good job, hun.
Not exactly the confidence boost they needed, and they weren't the only pair struggling. That wall was causing trouble for everyone. But when Colby and Brynn faced the judges, they weren't ready for what was coming.
These dishes look very different.
Their presentation was already lacking, but Chef Ramsay noticed something about Brynn's salmon. He was impressed with the cook, but the sauce on the outside, yeah, that was just weird.
Just looks bizarre.
Fair.
Chef Ramsay was direct with his feedback, but Joe, he tossed all that episode 5 growth out the window and went back to his brutal self.
The sauce, they look like pureed baby food. Okay.
Ouch. Colby's plate had even more problems. And when Joe cut into Colby's salmon, what a mess. Meanwhile, Brynn's salmon was perfectly cooked if that wasn't obvious by now. But there was no reason to celebrate. Not only were their fates tied, but that sauce was a total disaster, just as expected. Back to Colby's dish, Chef Ramsay couldn't have been more blunt.
No seasoning in the puree and a sauce again. It does not make sense.
And to pile on the misery, Joe had more to add.
With the dish is actually wrong on your palate as well.
They were way off the mark, and Brynn couldn't figure out how Colby's salmon ended up raw when he dropped his fillet 30 seconds before hers. Maybe he forgot to turn on the burner. Another mystery for me to ponder late at night. No doubt this was a tough challenge, but the outcome was about to be even tougher. When it was time to reveal the worst performing pair, Colby and Brynn knew what was coming.
Reagan, Jennifer, please say goodbye and make your way up to the balcony.
Despite the letdown, Chef Ramsay had some encouraging words for Brynn.
Wows every time. That's how I'm going to remember you.
As for Colby, he might have missed the mark that night, but Chef Ramsay was still impressed with his overall journey.
Cook with your heart, and that flavor profile is unique.
And with a lot of tears shed as they left, but hey, chaos is just another day in the MasterChef kitchen. Just like that time a tag team challenge spiraled into complete disaster.
Everything ready for our tart to tame. Layer those pears face down.
The tag team challenge is one of those wild twists on MasterChef. Two chefs work on the same dish, but they never cook at the same time. It's like tag team cooking, where one cooks while the other watches, and they switch back and forth until time's up. Sounds tricky, right? This time, Michael had an immunity pin, so he should have been safe. But since there was an odd number of chefs, he had to join the challenge anyway. The catch? No matter how bad he did, he couldn't be eliminated.
There you go.
Frankly, if I didn't have this pin, I'd be freaking out right now.
And guess what they were cooking? Just a little thing called beef Wellington and chocolate souffle, nothing too crazy.
Mushroom risotto. A stunning beef Wellington.
Just when the pressure was hitting everyone hard, the judges threw them a small lifeline. Well, something's better than nothing, right? Things got really interesting when it came time to pick partners. Christian surprised everyone by ditching Willie and teaming up with Brandy. If you've been watching, you know Christian and Brandy are both big personalities who love to shout but struggle with taking it.
Whoever's on the side, make your voice heard. And whoever's working the line, keep your ears open.
Shanika promised to keep her ego in check and handle Bowen's quirks.
So I'm gonna have to put my ego to the side and put out the best dishes that we can as a team.
While Gabriel wasn't too thrilled with his partner's situation.
I'm not that kind of guy. I don't like yelling. So my main goal today is just focus on myself.
Not a great start for any of these teams. Brandy was worried about Christian's loud, aggressive nature, hoping he'd actually listen to her. Meanwhile, poor Willie got the short end of the stick.
Communication, so we have to make sure we're not too quiet. We're gonna have to open our voices a little bit.
The first switch happened just 10 minutes in, and it was already a mess.
Put the prosciutto first, and then layer them on each layer.
Are you sure?
Yes.
Bowen was having communication issues, leaving Shanika to figure things out on her own. Things got so chaotic that Chef Ramsay had to step in to calm them down.
Crepe, duxelle, ham, filet, and then roll.
Shanika was struggling with the Wellingtons, and Bowen seemed completely out of it. And if you know Chef Ramsay, you know he hates messing up beef Wellingtons. As the next switch approached, Chef Ramsay was all over the teams, pushing them to get those Wellingtons wrapped up.
Teams, you've got to get your Wellingtons wrapped. Right, Shanika.
Yes, chef.
Come on, you gotta get that roll. Come on, Bowen, please.
Come on, move a little bit.
Bowen finally snapped out of it, but Chef Ramsay warned Shanika about Bowen's listening issues. Remember, even though it was a team challenge, only one member of each team would be safe, while the other would face elimination. Willie and Amanda's station wasn't smooth either. And just like that, another switch came up. Even if everyone was perfect, this challenge would still be a disaster. Despite the chaos, Brandy and Christian, and Derek and Michael were really impressing the judges.
Derek and Michael, look, they seem very, very happy to work.
I think it's a pair that could produce good dishes tonight.
Chef Ramsay even gave some praise to Dara and Fred, but their Wellington was far from perfect. Dara's freakout didn't help matters. With only 30 minutes left, Brandy and Christian still had major communication issues. But when it came to plating, Shanika stepped up big time and started turning things around.
Well done, Shanika.
Wow. Good job. Nice. Come on, Shanika, well done.
This is all on you. Bowen, that. A burn is a burn.
Bowen was still on the edge of ruining everything, but time was up. It was a whirlwind of a challenge, and when Willie and Amanda went first, Joe wasn't holding back his critique.
That's definitely undercooked, and it looks a little bit too condensed.
Their beef Wellington had a lot of raw dough. Fred and Dara's dish also had issues. Their broth was off, the dough was undercooked, and the glazed pears missed the mark. Wellington was a mess. Next up were Brandy and Christian. Given the chaos, their dish was messy, but their seasoning was spot on. It could have been worse. Shanika and Bowen were a sight to see. Despite almost burning down their station, their risotto wowed Joe.
Before to one of my restaurants, this is what risotto's supposed to look like.
And that was just the start. Even Aaron was impressed with their Wellington. Who would have thought their chaos led to such high praise?
This is the closest Wellington to eating it in Gordon's restaurant. Proportioned, well cooked, well seasoned. Wow, good job.
Chef Ramsay wrapped things up with a nice touch. They totally nailed the challenge. The only other pair close to matching them was Derek and Michael, who wowed the judges with their tart.
The caramelization on the pears is magic. You did it right.
I can quite comfortably say I'd serve this in my flagship restaurant tonight.
Only one immunity pin was up for grabs. Still a gimmick if you ask me, and it went to Shanika and Bowen. That's a serious comeback. But for one competitor, their time in the spotlight had ended.
Keep a lookout, because I got more coming.
Gabriel had a promising start, but his passion had faded. He often looked lost and missed some basics.
Salt, you're missing the right amount of wine for acidity. It's missing.
Remember, it's always about the seasoning. Never forget to salt your food. As for Wellington's crust, Aaron wasn't a fan.
And that's why mine is cooked unevenly. It's a shame.
Gabriel's performance was his worst yet, but he wasn't alone in struggling. But what the next contestant had to deal with wasn't any better. In Season 7 of MasterChef, Nathan was doing great, impressing both the judges and his fellow contestants with his cooking skills. But then, things started to go downhill.
Nathan and Terry, are you ready to pick your teams?
Nathan, despite his earlier successes, hit a major bump that really tested his leadership and patience. He had just won the last challenge, which gave him a big role in the next round. This came with its own set of challenges, especially since not everyone was thrilled about him taking on this leadership role. As highlighted at...
Nathan is definitely a wild card. 20-year-old kid, and I'm weary of his leadership qualities.
Some contestants were really not happy about Nathan leading them, and that set the stage for the drama to come. When Nathan was picked to lead the next challenge, it was clear right from the start that he was in for a rough ride. The task was to serve 150 wedding guests, a huge job that needed perfect coordination and teamwork.
It's just like getting picked for dodgeball in middle school. No one wanted me then, and it definitely looks like nobody wants me now.
It was obvious that only a few contestants had confidence in Nathan as their leader, which showed a lack of support from his peers. From the get-go, things didn't go smoothly for Nathan. His team wasn't listening to him, which led to growing frustration. This problem became clear when Nathan struggled to get his team to follow instructions, started messing up their performance.
Guys, please stop. I'm trying to talk and you're talking over me, Sean.
His frustration built up quickly as his team seemed more interested in doing their own thing rather than working together under his guidance. Maybe his leadership skills weren't up to par. Eventually, he ended up shouting at everyone to listen to him.
Quiet!
Everybody calm, just calm.
He was really losing his patience. Maybe he was just too young and inexperienced to be a leader, but the yelling was non-stop. The team members were cooking scallops at their own pace even before the guests had even sat down for the wedding.
Nick's not even married yet. We're about to screw the wedding.
Meanwhile, nothing was going according to his plan, and everyone decided they'd rather listen to Sean at that point. His lack of leadership became pretty clear when he started shouting, hoping it would force the team to follow his orders. His frustration was obvious as he struggled to manage the situation. The team, however, was too focused on their own tasks to pay much attention to his outbursts. They were prepping food way too early, showing a serious lack of coordination and timing.
Sean, I need you to stop.
Nathan and Sean got caught up in a serious power struggle. The tension was sky high as they dealt with issues that were really pushing Nathan to his breaking point.
Sean, I need those scallops now.
Whoa.
Oh my gosh.
The team hit a critical snag when they almost served undercooked scallops, which only piled on the stress. With the tight schedule, this slip-up didn't help at all.
Oh my gosh.
Come on, Nathan!
Despite the mess, things did start to get better over time. You know, when Chef Ramsay has some advice to share, it's in your best interest to listen carefully. If you don't, you might just end up failing spectacularly. If memory serves, Season 13, Episode 6 was quite the roller coaster, especially with the contestants facing their very first mystery box challenge. And guess what the secret ingredient was? Yep, you guessed it, apples. A fan favorite, and not just in the kitchen. Just to set the stage, the contestants were split into groups based on regions: Midwest, South, Northeast, and West. Each group had their own ideas about what they wanted to create, but Kyle had a special advantage. He got to decide which flavor profile each region would have to work with. Here's how it played out. 2 of the regions would be tasked with making sweet dishes, and the other 2 with savory. And since Kyle held all the cards, he decided to play the game strategically.
Presume we would like savory. Question is, who's the second savory?
For his home region, the Midwest, Kyle chose savory, thinking it would give them a solid chance. But then came the curveball.
Move on to the Northeast, Kyle. What are your thoughts? What will they be cooking?
So I think they're going to be cooking sweet tonight.
He decided to throw a wrench into the plans of the South and Northeast regions by assigning them the sweet flavor, considering them his biggest rivals. As for the West region, Kyle didn't see them as much of a threat, so he let them go with savory as well. And this is where things started to get tense.
It's a harissa rubbed scallops, and we're gonna have an apple.
Enter Wayne, the wild card from the Midwest team. After messing up with poor technique in an earlier challenge, he was given the savory task, even though he had been itching to create something sweet. This decision would set the stage for some serious drama in the kitchen. However, Wayne decided to go with couscous, which was a pretty bold choice, especially given his past disasters with risotto. Joe wasn't exactly confident in Wayne's decision either. He gave Wayne a heads up, warning him to make sure the flavors were balanced just right, so that the apple would stand out, but not so much that it overwhelmed the whole dish. Now, let's turn our attention to Richie, who was handed the challenge of creating something sweet. You see, Kyle knew all too well about Richie's struggles with desserts, but this time, it looked like Richie had a plan up his sleeve.
Using the black Arkansas apple, and I'm doing a honey spice cupcake.
It was a bold move, no doubt, but it quickly became apparent that Richie had bitten off more than he could chew. Chef Ramsay even stepped in and warned him to reconsider his approach.
I gotta get the batter done. Have you started the batter? It was very disappointing. I'm hoping you climb that ladder tonight.
The sweet tarts Richie was working on required a lot of time, focus, and delicate handling. But Richie, feeling confident, forged ahead. As the clock ticked down, there was growing concern about Richie's cupcakes.
They didn't rise.
They didn't rise at all.
So they're gonna be dense.
Yep.
Oh, damn it.
It turned out he made a critical mistake. He forgot to add the baking powder. And what was the outcome? The cupcakes didn't rise at all and ended up looking horribly dense. To make matters worse, he ran out of time and couldn't even finish the decorations. But Richie wasn't the only one in trouble. Kendall had his own kitchen disaster. Oh no, this isn't looking good, but it's just churros, right? How bad could it be? Well, it turns out Kendall really messed up. He accidentally switched two of the most crucial ingredients.
Like salty like French fries. There's no sugar on these.
The judges were left stunned, and Reagan had one of the most memorable reactions you could imagine.
Churros. You ever heard of such? Baby.
Kendall went from plating some of the best dishes earlier in the competition to presenting what could easily be considered the absolute worst. But hold on, we're not done yet. Remember Wayne and his couscous? After seeing Kendall's slip up, none of the judges were holding out much hope for Wayne. But when it was time for Wayne to present his dish, this is what went down.
It looks smooth and velvety. I like the plating.
Top-notch presentation.
And the taste? Even better than anyone could have expected.
With the scallops. Absolutely spot on. Really good job. Thank you.
To everyone's surprise, including his own, Wayne's harissa spice scallops with apple fennel puree turned out to be a total hit. Talk about a complete turnaround. However, with Jennifer's dish claiming the top spot for the evening, the entire South region was declared safe. Yes, that even included Kendall and his salty disaster. And honestly, Kendall could hardly believe how lucky he got.
Oh my God.
But here's where things really start to get interesting, because now it was time to call out the worst dishes of the night. And guess who was the first to be named?
A tarragon whipped cream on the side.
What are you calling them?
Home cakes.
Who?
Yep, those cupcakes that Richie made could bring down the mood at any party. But wait, Richie tried to pull a fast one on the judges by giving his dish a different name. Yeah, a clever move, or so he thought. He figured a quick name change might cover up the fact that those definitely weren't what you'd call cupcakes. All he really needed to do was own up to his mistake with the baking powder, but instead, Richie tried to play it off with a tactical maneuver. Unfortunately for him, the judges weren't having it.
You wanted to call them what they became?
And Joe didn't hold back with his critique. I mean, just look at that dish. There was absolutely nothing appealing about it. But did the taste redeem it at all? Let's find out.
Yeah, that's the kind of thing I'd love to see inside those home cakes. So, it's Mr. Mark.
You kept talking about the sauce being soaked into them. You need a bowl of that stuff.
In the end, Richie's so-called home cakes earned him a spot in the elimination round. But Richie wasn't alone in the Great Fails Brigade that night. Take Charles from the Midwest team, for instance. He presented a pan-seared red snapper with apple and potato scales. Unfortunately, Charles made a glaring mistake that was impossible to overlook.
I didn't know that it was wrong for me to put raw white wine.
Ironically, the parts of the dish without the apple were the only ones that tasted any good. And then there was Lizzie, who served up pan-seared scallops with apple and celery root puree. But her dish had a serious issue too.
See right there, you've absolutely cremated the scallops.
The scallops weren't just overcooked, they were downright burnt. With so many culinary missteps, the judges now had the tough task of choosing the worst dish of the night. And who do you think it was?
Tonight was a bit of a mess, young man. You missed the mark.
If only Richie had come clean about the missing baking powder, maybe, just maybe, he could have avoided elimination. But alas, that's how it goes in the high-stakes world of cooking competitions. And let me tell you, you're so not ready for what happened in this next episode.
You do this, you do that, you do this. It's everyone's just kind of throwing things on like...
In episode 10 of season 10, Garen Hurt, season 9's winner, came back to his alma mater for, of all things, his wedding. Yeah, I've seen enough weddings on this show and Hell's Kitchen to know how bad things were gonna go here. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. So the judges selected two contestants, Bree and Wuta, as the leaders of the blue and red teams respectively. While Bree decided to go with filet mignon, Wuta decided to cook lobster. Now that the menu was set, it was time to pick team.
This is the team that I wanted from first pick to last.
With a spare few minutes to plan their dishes around their chosen protein, Wuta's red team decided to go with this.
Discussion, but I'm thinking we do like a roasted lobster tail, maybe like a puree.
However, when Jamie suggested stuffing the lobster with breadcrumbs, Wuta couldn't have agreed any faster. But Dorian was concerned with the presentation angle. They were, after all, cooking for a wedding reception. Everything had to be spot on. Speaking of, the judges had their own part to play too. As the guests arrived, Joe surprised everyone by playing the guitar, while Chef Ramsay took on the role of the officiant.
Claire, you husband and wife, you may kiss your gorgeous bride.
cooked. Meanwhile, Wuta wanted to give his best. He was bursting with excitement to cook for Garen, his very inspiration for being on MasterChef. It had to have felt like a dream for him, but Dorian saw the eventual nightmare coming.
Or are we gonna just go into it? We're good, trust me.
However, Wuta had put all of his trust in his team, and he didn't want to micromanage them. But, I mean, when you gotta dish out a large number of identical plates simultaneously, maybe not the best strategy. Anyway, when it came down to the distribution of the work, Jamie took charge of the lobster and was pretty clear on how he wanted the lobsters to be cooked. Meanwhile, Wuta, who was a vegetarian by the by, stepped away to assist Dorian with his prosciutto-wrapped asparagus.
How many do you have done?
4.
Just make sure that they look neat, okay?
But while Wuta was the team captain, Dorian was doing more bossing around than he ever could. Seeing this, Noah, who had to sit this one out due to a shellfish allergy, was worried about Wuta's lack of leadership.
Our leader's not establishing a game plan.
There was no game plan or organization. Everyone was just doing their own thing. And his worries were warranted. Boy, were they ever. Because when Chef Ramsay paid them a visit, he wasn't even sure how much they'd progressed.
About the dish, what are you doing?
We're doing a stuffed,
So, Chef Ramsay took the plunge. The more Chef Ramsay dug into each dish, the more he questioned Wuta's leadership. Over on the other side, Jamie was cutting up all the lobsters and leaving them to dry out before cooking. Because why not?
Yes, chef. What happens to it?
It dies.
You can't cut a lobster like that and leave it there. All the goodness runs out of it. Do you understand?
Yes, chef.
But that wasn't even the worst part. Chef Ramsay wasn't convinced about their progress or Wuta's leadership. With 30 minutes down the drain, the judges decide to give Wuta's dish a taste.
Delicious. Like the lobster and the filling.
But needs is finesse. No. You're up against the fillet.
I'm internalizing it.
Yeah, it was delicious, but majorly lacked finesse. Now, Wuta was forced to rethink his team's approach. His new goal was to make the dish enjoyable with just a fork. At first, the team had decided to split the lobsters down the middle, leaving one uncracked claw and the small legs intact. Wuta now wanted the meat released from the shell and the claws ditched entirely, and they were gonna need to make those adjustments fast.
Damn, we only got 60 minutes left. We don't have enough time to switch gears.
But would they be able to deliver? Well, to hedge their bets, Sarah stepped up and took charge of preparing the lobsters.
You cut it straight down the middle. Break all of these rib bones.
However, releasing the meat from the shell was an extremely time-consuming and frustrating process. As they struggled to get the lobsters prepared in time, 6 team members, including Noah, jumped in to work on the lobsters.
And now you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. In fact, 6 of the red team.
Unfortunately, Noah's shellfish allergy got the better of him in mere moments, and he had to back out before things got dicey. Despite all the efforts, when the lobsters finally hit the oven, they curled up and pushed all of their stuffing out.
Jeez, what's going on? They're just falling apart. They're falling apart. I have no idea. They're literally falling apart.
Yeah, it was inevitable. And something else that was inevitable, Chef Ramsay having half a mind to kick them out and be done with it. With just 20 minutes remaining, the team was forced to come up with a third game plan.
You gotta take all this meat, cut the tails in half, and then load meat back into it.
But would they finally be able to make it? Well, they made it to the tasting at the end of the day. They presented baked stuffed lobster with fennel puree and prosciutto wrapped asparagus. Initially, the guests seemed to enjoy the lobster and its stuffing.
But then also this lobster.
Red team's lobster, a lot better. The breadcrumbs were really good.
However, not all of the guests were so lucky as to have perfectly cooked lobster. And then the complaints started coming.
Makes that happen. Look at that.
Poor Chef Ramsay was genuinely embarrassed. But the blue team had their own hiccups. You wouldn't know it from how I've ignored them entirely up to this point, but some of their steaks came out a bit undercooked. But, well, it was nothing compared to the red team's woes. Wuta's reluctance to actually lead his team led to 3 different preparations of lobster, all of which were a complete dumpster fire. Wuta felt crushed and took responsibility for the red team's colossal failure, but Jamie tried to shoulder some of that burden for them. Either way, the team's inability to execute a cohesive plan had ultimately cost them the challenge and sent them straight into a backyard barbecue elimination test. One team's dish was so unpalatable, the judges struggled to hide their reaction, Bethy and Bime leading 8 teams. They had 90 minutes to prepare a 10-ounce NY strip steak, a sauce, and 2 side dishes for 101 off-duty firefighters. We then see Chef Ramsay go on and on about Walmart.
Only 1 in 5 steaks is good enough to be called Walmart Choice Premium Beef. It's aged for flavor and tenderness.
Okay, let me stop you right there. It was tough to take a culinary giant seriously when they were promoting Walmart. Maybe the show couldn't land any other sponsors big enough to cover the production costs. Who really knows? I wonder how many of his restaurants actually sourced from Walmart. A savvy restaurateur like Joe would never let the Walmart brand be linked to his restaurants. It is seen as cheap, impersonal, low quality, and just not sophisticated enough for Joe. As expected on the show, this team challenge unfolded with the usual mix of communication breakdowns and mayhem.
There's not even a steak seared yet.
But let's fast forward and see who were declared as winners.
Blue team!
So, Bime's Team Red was on the way to the pressure test, and all hell broke loose during cleanup. Luca tried to keep it chill, but Beth started crying about the cauliflower puree being disgusting. Meanwhile, Natasha took it super personally and went off.
That is disrespectful to talk about food saying that it's disgusting. You don't call food disgusting, period.
Although Bree rushed to comfort Beth, things were getting heated fast.
You are doing nothing to help the problem. You are literally causing it.
I'll spare you the drama. So skipping ahead, the judges decide to save Bime and give him the chance to rescue another contestant.
I'm getting out of there. If you give me the chance, I'm out.
This left the other 6 team members to face off in a pressure test that was all about this.
4 components. A perfectly poached egg sitting upon a slice of
They had 30 minutes to cook the judges a perfect plate of Eggs Benedict. And this when Graham came up with a warning.
Highly technical dish to perfect. Guys, it's time to head to your stations.
On the other hand, guess what Joe had to say?
You only get 1 shot at this. You've just 30 minutes to cook us that perfect plate.
And as always, Chef Ramsay had the last word.
Be maybe 2 out of the 6 contestants tonight breaking their hollandaise sauce.
For home cooks, the only practical way to hold hollandaise for 20 minutes is to pour it into a thermos, and they probably don't have those. Leaving it at room temp will just make it congeal, thicken up, and maybe even separate or break, which means you'll be scrambling to fix it at the last minute. Hollandaise should always be whipped up right before you dish it out. Anyway, Beth seemed confident, claiming she always whipped up Eggs Benedict at home.
I want, more than anything, to take Natasha out.
Usually, when they highlight that, it's a sign that the person is about to get the boot. Bree confesses she'd never nailed a poached egg. And I guess you have a fair idea of how that's gonna end.
An egg.
Who do you think's gonna nail this one? Who's gonna...
Funny how the editing usually sets someone up for a surprise success. Anyway, back to the test. Natasha was playing it cool, saving her sauce for the final touch. But that's when Chef Ramsay tried to shake her confidence with some tough love.
Things can go wrong even if you're good at it.
Meanwhile, Chrissy hit a snag. Her hollandaise was a mess. And the next thing you know, we could see her tossing out the sauce, which is the absolute last resort when your hollandaise splits or goes south.
There's no way she's getting done.
Hey, Chrissy, let's take the hollandaise.
It's coming.
Yep.
The judges were pretty concerned.
Full?
I can't watch this anymore.
Oh my God. I have 1 egg left.
But did she recover? Oh, wait. Guess what happened meanwhile?
I'm not sure if the yolk broke or not.
You want to see how good it is? It's right there on my glasses.
Ah, you're yet to see the worst though.
Last minute, guys.
Yikes. But what did I tell you about editing? If it's going bad during the cooking process, 8 times out of 10, the contestant will deliver during the judging and vice versa. Anyway, when time was up, the Benedicts hit the table.
So, bacon cooked beautifully.
Yeah, as expected, Kathy's dish was flawless from egg to base.
There's nowhere near enough of it. You've just sort of drizzled it on there when it should coated.
Meanwhile, Luca's eggs were underdone. Graham then did his thing, which is sticking the entire fork in his mouth and exaggerated his chewing while looking up to the left.
It's kind of all over the place.
And then he said,
Natasha's Eggs Benedict looks the worst.
Natasha's plate was a mess, egg yolks leaking all over, and her hollandaise got overbeaten. Too buttery and not enough yolk, ending up more like mayo.
Honestly, I added a little too much vinegar, and so turned to mayonnaise.
She blamed it on too much vinegar, but really, it's that delicate yolk-to-fat balance that separates hollandaise from mayonnaise. Next up, Beth, despite her confidence, served up a messy plate.
Beth failed miserably. Looks like a mess.
You seem so confident.
She'd never had a hollandaise break before, but that day, it was a disaster, complete with those slightly undercooked eggs.
Slightly undercooked.
But she owned up to it without excuses.
You would have made that dish better by leaving the sauce off.
Yeah, I respect your integrity. Rest in peace, Beth. Now Bree, despite her lack of experience with the dish, nailed her Benedict. It was nearly flawless, with the best presentation of the bunch. As for Chrissy, she managed to pull through too, serving enough hollandaise, and soon enough, she was in the clear.
Wow.
And what do you know? It tasted good too.
Okay,
Next, the judges were deep in deliberation, stuck because all 4 performances were so bad they couldn't make a clear call. Chrissy and Bree were obviously safe, but Beth, Natasha, Luca, and Kathy were all on thin ice. And just as you're waiting for the verdict, Chef Ramsay dropped the bomb.
This is not the way I'm supposed to go out.
None of you nailed it.
Just when it seems like they might all get axed, something crazy happened.
We'll be leaving the kitchen.
No. Oh my God.
What?
Yeah, they announce an epic, overly dramatic pressure test, MasterChef history in the making.
OMG.
Where we will decide which one of you will...
It was to stretch over a full extra episode in Vegas just to decide who would be going home among these four. It was clear this was all part of the plan from the start, from a production standpoint, but I wonder what would have happened if only 2 flopped while 4 excelled. But anyway, this time, the 4 contestants in danger of elimination were led to a real restaurant.
But this isn't just any Vegas restaurant.
It's mine.
Yes, it was Chef Ramsay's Burgier restaurant in Sin City in the Planet Hollywood complex.
We average about 860 burgers a night.
Now, they don't make their menu available online, but you can read their reviews on Yelp, and many customers have complained about cold fries, under-seasoned burgers that were mediocre at best, and not worth the price at all. For example, one customer named Kathleen from Canada, who decided to splurge on Wagyu burgers in March this year, says that the entire dining experience was unsatisfactory and not what you'd expect from a Gordon Ramsay restaurant. For $50, she got a bad burger. The only toppings were a few onion pieces, the patty, and a single piece of cheese. And get this, the bun was completely soggy. Another customer named Benjamin from LA, who visited the restaurant in May this year, wrote, "Damn bro, you should be ashamed. Gordon Ramsay would yell at Gordon Ramsay if he ate here. I'd love to see a Kitchen Nightmares episode of this place." Damn, it's that bad, huh? Anyway, back to the episode. The restaurant shut down its usual service, handing over operations to the contestants. Graham explained that Burger typically runs with 13 chefs. A head chef, 3 sous chefs, and 9 line cooks. However, it was just the 4 contestants in charge that night, even though they'll likely serve a limited number of guests. Chef Ramsay stepped into the role of expediter to keep things moving smoothly.
At some point during tonight's service, we've invited some high-rolling Vegas VIPs to taste your burgers.
Next, the judges paired up the teams. Beth was paired with Natasha, while Luca teamed up with Kathy. It was clear Luca and Kathy had the edge here. Since Luca runs a restaurant, he kinda already knew how to make it work. The challenge gave them 1 hour for prep and 75 minutes for continuous service, focusing on creating a unique signature burger. Luca opted for an all-beef burger with caramelized onions and sauce, skipping the cheese. Kathy, however, fretted over America's cheese-on-burger obsession.
The burgers, I don't agree because I feel every burger in town should be with cheese.
Now, Beth's vision was a mouth-watering hangover burger featuring Gruyere, crispy prosciutto, a sunny-side-up egg, and truffle aioli.
Hangover burger. We'll get some Gruyere, some crispy prosciutto, and a sunny-side-up egg with like a truffle aioli.
I mean, just hearing about it makes me hungry. It sounds absolutely incredible. Now they had to worry about getting the patties and the eggs just right. However, Natasha had a strategic move. She was letting Beth take charge and make all the decisions. By stepping back from the leadership role right away, Natasha was setting herself up to avoid blame if their team loses.
At fault later in this competition, she's going to take the blame because I'm just going along with what she thinks.
I mean, that's incredibly shrewd. Moving on, the judges decide to dive into the patty, the heart of any great burger.
Why would you need to put egg in the burger when you've got those 2 blends?
I do it all the time and it makes it so moist.
I mean, using them.
Chef Ramsay seemed overly concerned when Beth added egg to her patty mix, but that might just be for the cameras. After all, the egg adds richness, not a whole new flavor profile. Later, Chef Ramsay stepped in because it looked like they prioritized toppings over the patty itself.
You're dressing salad and we haven't got the burger pate done. Get that pate nailed now before you do anything.
And it wasn't long before he predicted they were headed for a loss.
Both of you, someone's going home tonight. And right now, at this stage, it's one of you.
By MasterChef logic, this means they'll actually win. It's funny how you can start predicting these outcomes once you start minutely observing how formulaic the editing is. However, both teams faced setbacks and had to adjust their plans on the fly. Lucas sacrificed his sauce plans to assist Kathy with caramelizing onions, which, by the way, were falling way behind schedule.
It's too long to prepare the caramelized onions. I don't have time for the sauce.
Meanwhile, Beth and Natasha scrapped their sunny-side-up eggs due to difficulties, opting instead for goat cheese and arugula to complement their crispy prosciutto.
Just scratch the egg, do the goat cheese, arugula, and then the prosciutto. Exactly. Then I can focus more on the prosciutto and have it crispy.
Chef Ramsay also threw in a surprise rule as service kicked off. Once he called for an order and one team's dish was ready in the window, he'd wait no more than 60 seconds for the other team's dish before sending out the food.
Time. Otherwise,
then they start losing votes.
They start losing votes. You have 5 minutes.
It added a layer of complexity for the teams, but since they were making identical plates repeatedly, it was simpler compared to the usual chaos in restaurant kitchens where different dishes from various stations must sync perfectly. At one point, Beth and Natasha had an order ready to go, but Kathy and Luca hadn't even started cooking their patties. They were still on the grill.
We need them patties.
Yeah, but if they're not ready, they're not ready. What do you want me to do?
Chef Ramsay started yelling at Luca, as if that would magically speed up the cooking process.
Focus the window, order's gone.
Put the onion in, put the onion in. 5, 4.
Instead, it just left Luca feeling frustrated and powerless. In response, Luca plated rare burgers, which earned him another tongue lashing from Chef Ramsay.
It's that raw. You've lost it. Time up.
Careful, Chef Ramsay, your Hell's Kitchen vibe is showing. It was no walk in the park for Beth and Natasha's team either. They accidentally burned one of their buns in the salamander, and Chef Ramsay put a stop to everything just to give them an earful.
Start around like this. Do you know what that tells me?
Meanwhile, Luca and Kathy's burgers kept coming back undercooked.
Show the kitchen. Let me come back. Chef, these are completely raw.
Raw again.
As if things weren't tense enough, the VIPs arrived, who, by the way, were none other than the other contestants. Luca immediately decided to rush his orders to the window, leaving Beth and Natasha struggling to keep up within that tight 60-second window.
1 minute, let's go, Natasha.
Things on their side of it. Here you go, chef.
Natasha, come on, come on.
This tactic only worked for the final 4 burgers, automatically putting Natasha and Beth down by 4 votes. And finally, the results were in. Beth and Natasha ended up receiving the most votes. They didn't specify how many burgers they cooked, but judging from the voting device, one side had about 30 chips and the other side just under 25 chips. Well, I guess they likely served between 50 to 60 burgers in total. And with that, Kathy and Luca found themselves facing yet another challenge in this marathon pressure test that had already stretched across nearly 2 episodes. And this time, they were tasked with handling one of the most expensive, luxurious ingredients in the world.
Every year, 6 million of these are consumed in Vegas alone.
Yes, they had 45 minutes to pull it off with a small salad. Eventually, both contestants presented their lobster dishes, and Kathy's lobster turned out to be cooked perfectly.
Slightly exploded.
But Chef Ramsay found the removal of the knuckles from the shell a bit too rough for his liking. Next, it was time for Graham's feedback.
As far as the plating, it looks like another 2 or 3 minutes and
But her salad turned out to be overly acidic.
Good as the lobster.
Seasoned beautifully.
Perfectly cooked.
Meanwhile, Joe had his own set of criticism to make.
We all see something in you. Tonight, it's all down to this.
Now, coming to Luca's lobster. It was plated perfectly well, but the meat appeared too pale.
Anemic side because it's lacking color. And the slices down the middle, it should cut like a stick of butter. And it should be just glistening.
However, the lobster was glistening, which happens to be a positive point.
The only thing I would change is having that temperature be a little higher to get that color.
In the end, despite the thick competition, Kathy was the one who got the axe. By the way, did you know that after her appearance, she did 2 days of training at Chef Ramsay's London restaurant before being asked not to return? Yeah, that happened too. Anyway, moving on to Season 5, Episode 15. After losing the restaurant takeover challenge, the blue team led by Jamie and her brigade, Christian and Courtney, was in the pressure test, and this is what they had to cook.
It's a classic French dessert. Beautiful to look at, and even more incredible to eat.
I mean, that was definitely a tall order for the home cooks.
Forget the fancy name, let's just call it what it is. A big old yummy cream puff tower.
Yeah, they had only 90 minutes on the clock to build this pastry monstrosity. Chef Ramsay went on about how the tower needed to have the right consistency and filling.
That is not easy. And then there's the filling. The consistency has to be perfect. Not too sweet, not too thick.
In filling.
Make sure the whole thing doesn't fall over.
And it absolutely couldn't collapse.
Into an incredible cone, bound with threads of caramel. Look at this light pastry.
The task was incredibly difficult. However, Courtney expressed confidence that things would come together, but Chef Ramsay pointed out that her cream puffs were varying in size.
Purposely done, or?
I was going for consistency, realized.
If you're not going home, who is?
I don't know.
She acknowledged this flaw and admitted she might be the one going home.
20 minutes to go.
With only 20 minutes left until the deadline, they began preparing their caramel. They discussed the delicate process of caramelization, emphasizing the need to leave it undisturbed or risk ruining it. By the time Jamie began assembling her tower, and soon after, Courtney followed suit. However, Christian complained that his sugar wasn't the right color yet.
The right color. If I don't get the right texture or the right color, I'm all the way screwed.
Meanwhile, Courtney was hard at work assembling hers. With just 8 minutes left, Christian struggled and ended up burning himself while his tower started collapsing due to the improperly caramelized sugar.
Now it's starting to collapse.
Frantically using tongs to salvage fallen pieces, Christian faced a race against the clock. As time dwindled down to 30 seconds, the pressure was intense.
30 seconds to go.
And just like that, the time was up, and the home cook stepped up to present their creations. Chef Ramsay approached Courtney, complimenting how beautiful her tower looked.
The spun sugar just should tear away.
He carefully removed a piece and placed it on a cream puff. It was a job well done. Graham couldn't stop raving about her spun sugar.
It adds a completely different thing in there, is that pastry cream. This is what we asked for.
And on top of it all, here comes the master stroke.
Thank you, Chef.
Christian.
Next, Chef Ramsay approached Christian, who decided to come forward with an open admission.
On the bottom, I've got a unfinished caramel, almost like a sort of...
Chef Ramsay noted that his tower was uneven in shapes and colors, lacking visual appeal.
The shape's moving there. You've got a slight indent here on the inside. So now it looks like it's been slammed against the wall.
Despite this, Chef Ramsay acknowledged that the puff itself was nicely cooked. Graham also tried to sample one, but 3 puffs pulled apart due to excessive caramel.
It's on that, so...
Although the flavor in itself was good, the caramel was off.
Jamie.
Chef.
Next up was Jamie, and Chef Ramsay pointed out that her creation lacked finishing touches.
The amount of sugar.
Yeah.
None of this sugar should be seen.
As for the caramel, it was a bit too heavy-handed.
When I pick one off there like that, the whole lot is going to come up in my hand.
Chef Ramsay then asked her to pull one off for him to taste, but it was stuck.
Then how the hell am I?
Frustrated, Jamie struggled to free one, prompting Chef Ramsay to express disbelief and remark that she might be in trouble. But eventually, she managed to hack one off. Chef Ramsay then cut it open, only to find it undercooked.
Good, but it tastes nowhere near as good as it looks. I'm sorry, Jamie.
Graham joined in and found the tower to be clumsy at the top, and he also criticized the bland cream and doughy profiterole. Despite it being structurally impressive, the issues kept mounting.
That was an incredibly difficult pressure test.
The pressure was at its peak, and the final result could go in anyone's favor.
And we need a moment to discuss that now.
In the end, Christian's tower was deemed the best tasting despite its lackluster appearance. Chef Ramsay then congratulated Courtney for her impressive tower, which left Jamie looking disappointed. Jamie hoped they would appreciate her visually appealing tower more, but Chef Ramsay had something else to reveal.
It was beautiful, but was totally impractical to break down. I'm sorry, my darling. Come and say goodbye, my darling, please.
I'm so sad.
Oh, and did anyone notice Joe's absence in this episode? No? I mean, is he that dismal? Anyway, let's head to Season 6, Episode 19.
Let's go, guys!
The episode kicked off with the 3 remaining cooks entering the MasterChef kitchen. Their challenge, cooking for 30 skilled chefs who work for the judges, their culinary crew. Which means, Hell's Kitchen fans, you now get to see some familiar faces behind Chef Ramsay.
Walking by her station?
Look at the whole station's grilled.
She looks in control.
I mean, these people know the judges' standards better than anyone else.
Look.
I only see 2 pressure cookers.
Are you kidding me?
As for the home cooks, the pressure was on.
One portion more.
Always.
Fortunately, I left a grill on, but we literally have 5 minutes left at this point.
I kinda was nervous for them because this was a lot.
That's a nail. I'm talking about a stunning, delicious.
But the semi-finalists won't be tackling this alone. Tommy, Katrina, and Hatal had returned to lend a hand. Steven teamed up with Tommy, Claudia paired with Katrina, and Derek partnered with Hatal. During the cooking session, Steven prepared pan-seared scallops with rutabaga.
Chef.
The smart move is you kept the grill on.
She's gonna be down to it.
I want you to go wash them.
Claudia opted for grilled octopus, and Derek focused on miso-marinated black cod. But at the 10-minute mark, Claudia ran out of octopus.
Getting up to speed.
Thank you so much. Thank you, enjoy.
The judges were worried, or should I say prompted to act worried.
Scallops for me, amazing. The flavor sort of sings in my mouth.
But she managed to whip up more before time ran out. When it was time to present their dishes to the judges, Hell's Kitchen Season 10 winner Christina Wilson favored Claudia's dish.
But wait till you see what's inside.
However, in the final tally, Derek secured 15 out of 30 votes, earning a spot in the MasterChef finale. This means Claudia and Steven were headed to the pressure test.
Getting to the finale is getting the opportunity to completely change your life.
And they didn't really have much time for the same.
Come on, guys. Start visualizing your next 30 minutes.
Believe me, it was game on.
Where's my bowl?
Guys, Claudia has gotten rid of... How could you make a mistake like that?
I'm in serious trouble.
Seeing loved ones from around the globe visibly lifts their spirits, providing a much-needed boost before the pressure test begins.
Hard to watch. They're both making huge fundamental errors.
Anyway, during the cooking session, Claudia faced a setback when she accidentally tossed out her extra panna cotta mix.
125 degrees.
And the judge reactions were pretty loud.
Claudia, this could be a $250,000 steak.
But of course, she managed to recover in time to remake it. Meanwhile, Steven made a mistake by using a whisk to fold in his egg whites, which isn't ideal.
Right now, I'm starting to second.
Despite this, his souffle managed to rise, but unfortunately, he put it in the oven prematurely.
Medium rare.
This led it to collapse before the judges could sample it.
Thank you.
Anyway, time for the judgment, and Claudia's dish looked pretty solid. However, Steven's was kind of flat. It wasn't surprising to see Claudia win the round. Next, Graham tried the steak Fritos and mentioned they were both cooked perfectly, but he didn't say much about the taste.
It has been an amazing journey. I've learned so much.
Finally, Chef Ramsay tried the panna cotta with raspberry coulis hidden inside. Claudia's was well set, and the inside was great, but like the other judges, Chef Ramsay didn't give much detail about how it tasted. As for Steven's filling, it was leaking out, and this turned out to be a huge problem.
I came here to change my life.
Their own cookbook.
I don't think Derek knows what's about to hit him.
And the MasterChef title.
America's next MasterChef.
In the end, the results were pretty obvious. Claudia went on to the finale, and Steven had to pack his knives and go home. However, Chef Ramsay made an incredible offer to him. So, can you think of more times when the pressure test turned into an intense battleground? Make sure to share your thoughts in the comments section down below. And if you enjoyed this video, make sure to drop a like, subscribe, and turn on my post notifications. If you thought these dishes were bad, be sure to check out the next video where the judges couldn't even finish their tasting after one contestant's shocking mistake.